There's been an ongoing debate in comic fandom in regards to continuity and its utilization as a tool from creators to solidify their stories with importance. The idea of continuity is generally agreed upon to be a continuance of previous stories, solidifying a rich history for characters. In comics, fans are able to understand what is an official component of a character's history, establishing a timeline of key moments that are pivotal in the lives of said characters. Generally speaking, there's moments that are fundamental to a hero, such as an origin story, but from that point lies variances differentiating the hero's first iteration and their modern interpretation. Take Superman for example. Doomed planet, desperate scientists, last hope, kindly couple. That's what we know to be true in regards to Superman stories, and that's something that we have grown to expect. Now, as we move forward in the history of Superman, we see stories that conflict with one another. The question then is, which one is in continuity? The problem with that is that continuity is fickle and subject to change based on the most recent comics that are published and the incorporation of those moments. In Marvel, their universe operates in a sliding timescale, which means that characters that debut in the 60s would then be adjusted accordingly to fit into today. Let's say if Peter Parker was bit by the spider at 15 years old and today he's supposedly like late 20s, then we're to assume that he's been Spider-Man for just over a decade. DC's approach has varied wildly from Marvel, which is apparent in the use of continuity defining events. Crisis on Infinite Earths released in 1985 and finalized in streamlining the stories and character histories to be digestible. Moving on from that point, they've been operating under a new mutual understanding of defining the setting or universe for the stories to be created within. DC gets a lot of shit for rebooting all the time, but once you actually start reading, you realize that's not the case. While their universes expand or retract, the characters themselves have only been completely reset 2 times. Well, in the New 52, unless you were Batman or Green Lantern. In the modern era, DC tackles continuity through a nebulous statement of everything happened, leaving continuity up in the air unless specifically defined. With this in mind, we must look over to the alternate universes published by both companies in recent years, the Ultimate and Absolute lines. These lines operate as starting points for new readers, while also allowing for enjoyment of long-term fans of the characters. These histories are blank slates, and the only real continuity between them are the issues in each series that are releasing. As a result, the Absolute and Ultimate lines have seen exponential success in sales, drawing more readership to comics and capitalizing on a hunger for self-contained stories without the baggage of continuity. It was revealed recently that the first issue of Absolute Batman is the second highest selling comic of all time, behind X-Men #1 by Chris Claremont and Jim Lee. While sales aren't inherently indicative of quality, the conversations surrounding these initiatives have expanded dramatically in recent years. Comparing the sales to those of the mainline counterparts lends further credence to the notion that this is where the market and industry should be headed. Comic fans continue to engage in discourse about the reason manga is outperforming Western books, when the solution is just so simple. Comic publishers have been successful in drawing in new audiences by marketing towards these lines as starting from scratch. The first component is to expand in areas of awareness, make stories that are entry points, and highlight them to a wider demographic of people. The second of the components is accessibility. Cater to new audiences by offering a direct method of engaging with these stories at their convenience and reducing the barriers such as cost to the price of entry. Circling back to the importance and implementation of continuity overall, most fans will say that they like continuity because it makes them feel like the books that they read matter to the wider universe, And to alter continuity is to alter the characters as well. I've always had an issue with this idea because for the most part, creators seek out to tell the story that they intended to tell, and limiting these creators to work within the parameters of how it neatly packages into continuity is just unnecessary restrictions for stories that can be told. Instead of identifying the specific moment that a story takes place in a character's history, I would rather that the story the creators are telling is one where they focus on the importance of quality. And that's not saying that you can't also have quality in stories that are pertaining to continuity, but we have to remember that continuity is a crutch if used too frequently. In most cases, continuity is an obstacle to overcome, and as such requires the creation of added complexity to justify transgressions against the rigid structure of the universe. This is known as the retcon, or retroactive continuity. Retcons serve as the magic eraser for mistakes of the past, or for an explanation for why the story is keeping continuity intact. If anything, continuity should be something that's like an Easter egg, or something that the readers can point to and understand if they've read those books, but not a hindrance if you haven't. Continuity errors are nothing more than an inconsequential bump in the road for engaging with a story, and yet sometimes it's treated as egregiously as the original sin. When you start to think about some of the best superhero stories of all time, you realize how unimportant they are in regard to continuity and their respective universes. The medium-defining stories are ones that are able to be easily digested regardless of the understanding of continuity. While it's nice to believe that the stories that you're reading are important, at the end of the day, the importance is self-appointed. They only matter if they resonate with you on a personal level. Susanna Polo describes the inner conflict of fandom by stating, "It's easy to love continuity when it's a version of the story that you like, but you'll be begging for it to change when it's something you think is dumb." And honestly, I wholeheartedly agree. Let's do a thought exercise. You think of your favorite character of all time. For me, I'm gonna think about Daredevil because it's just the first one that pops into my mind. If you could erase one instance from that character's history, what comes to mind? For me, it wouldn't even be Shadowland. Honestly, I would just get rid of D.G. Chichester's run entirely that followed Ann Nescente's. But that's what I'm saying, we all have a specific era that we would like to get rid of, and the more importance that it's given with the wider universe or the new stories that are being published, the over-reliance on this past continuity that we don't like kind of sucks. Superhero stories weren't originally intended for connectivity, especially considering the various heroes that debuted after Superman were all created by different companies. Comics were seen as a disposable form of entertainment, unable to carry the prestige of other mediums. As such, comics weren't meticulously crafted to fit into a timeline, but instead focused on making the stories ones that would guarantee the next issue to be sold. Even in the early days of Marvel, Stan Lee repeatedly contradicted stories running simultaneously. In response to letters pages asking about how these errors came to be and how they were overlooked, Stan created Marvel's No Prize, which is a short way to say, "Thanks for paying closer attention than we were." It meant nothing except for the readers to feel like these errors were a feature and not a bug. I mean, even the early issues of Spider-Man changed Peter Parker's name to Peter Palmer, and he was Spider-Man, not Spider-Man. So I mean, they weren't really paying full attention, they just wanted to make sure that they hit the deadlines. And honestly, I can't blame them. Continuity originates from folklore, with various authors telling their iteration of stories with a protagonist with generally accepted traits and qualities that define them. Greek and Roman myth are perfect examples of how these deities fluctuated in characteristics based on what is best for the story. And speaking of deities, this line of thinking can also be applied to the three predominant sects of religion. Christianity and Islam are both built upon the foundation of Judaism, with each branching out based on the emphasis of readings of scripture and the perceived prophets to be followed. These practices of faith are interpretations of the written word, hand-selected based on the characteristics best suited for their following. I mean, I'm not well versed in Judaism or Islam, so please forgive me for my ignorance, but Christianity is also further secluded based on which books they place value in for their believers. Even God is inconsistent with his actions, being depicted to be brutal in the Old Testament and nurturing in the New Testament. This idea has just been stewing around in my head for the past couple of days, and I figured that I would just make a small video about it. Of course, we need continuity because we need to have a standardized definition of what makes a character. But on the other hand, we don't need to follow every single issue and feel like new issues releasing that contradict the past are somehow worse and bad for storytelling. Anyway, that's going to be enough out of me. If you like this video, give it a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. And I want to thank Korinzik and all of my supporters on Patreon for allowing me to make videos like this. I love it. And one last thing, go read some comics. Or else.